she warned me with a photo. 7 kids in matching t-shirts, smiling in front of Cinderella's castle, a perfectly framed shot, taken deliberately to fit everyone, except one. Ellie's absence wasn't a mistake, it was the point. I got the photo at 9:43 a.m., while changing my daughter's diaper in a gas station bathroom, 14 miles from home. We weren't on vacation. I was trying to calm a self-harming crying fit, with the smell of baby powder and gasoline in the air. Because my daughter, who has Down syndrome and sound sensitivity, can't even step into a grocery store without ear protection, let alone a plane. The message was from my mother-in-law Letty, all lowercase. The trip was a success. The kids are loving it. My name is Adam Walker. I'm 47, a residential electrician for 25 years, and a single father. For the last 7, I lost my wife to pancreatic cancer that took just 3 months to erase an entire marriage and leave a 3-year-old girl without a mom. I don't complain. Ellie is everything left of the most grounded woman I've ever known, and she never complains about anything. Letty was my late wife's mother. I was never the favorite son-in-law. She didn't attend our small wedding in Tampa. She showed up late to the funeral. And when Ellie was born with special needs, Letty was the first to say, "God doesn't make mistakes, but some tests clearly get skipped." I swallowed it, like always. Not out of fear, out of choice. Because when you're raising a daughter, like mine, you learn to save even your own emotions. But that photo cut with a precision no knife ever could. The house was quiet when we got back. I gave Ellie her bath, like I do every Wednesday, with lavender and rubber duckies. Then I sat at the kitchen table, the photos still open on my phone, the other grandkids' smiles, the bright balloons, and an empty corner of the frame, where someone had clearly been cropped out. I thought I was just being paranoid, until I opened the automated email from the airline. Letty had used my reward points to book the tickets. I paid for it without knowing. Literally. On the statement, 6 passengers, Orlando round-trip points. Redeemed. 187,000. Double quotes. 6. Ellie was the 7th. The first one left out. And ironically, the only one who signs thank you in ASL every time. She's handed a piece of candy. Ellie's absence wasn't an oversight. It was the cold logic behind a long-held disdain, now executed with method. And with my money, it took me 2 days to face Letty. Not because I couldn't, but because it wouldn't matter. She just answered with a tight smile. "Adam, don't take it personal. You know it'd be hard for Ellie, right? Too noisy, too busy. It's actually better for her." But what she really meant was something else. It's better for me. Less effort. Fewer explanations to others. The next day, Ellie cried the whole day. Not because of Disney. She didn't even know there was a trip, but because her favorite cousin Tyler had promised to play with her on Saturday. And he was in another state. I stayed there, sitting on the floor, Ellie in my lap, watching an old episode of Mr. Rogers she already knew by heart, until she fell asleep. The breakdown wasn't loud. It was the quiet kind. The kind dressed up as logistics. A calculated omission. And most of all, it was the sound of the front door clicking shut when Letty came to visit the next Sunday, and Ellie instinctively hid behind the living room curtain. Without anyone telling her to. My daughter doesn't know how to lie, but she knows how to protect herself. And in that moment, I realized Letty would never step foot in this house again. Not out of revenge, but because I was about to show her that sometimes, when you exclude the wrong person, you open the door to someone who knows exactly how to dismantle everything, without raising their voice. The first thing I learned when I started installing solar panels for retirees in Florida was that anything free ends up costing more than it should. Letty knew that. She's the kind who smiles at church bazaars while pocketing buffet silverware, always had that air of helping too much, as long as she could control everything, including how others should feel in return. In the months leading up to the trip, she started coming around more, helped with groceries, offered to watch Ellie just for a couple of hours so I could get some work done. I said yes. Being a single dad to a child with special needs isn't a marathon, it's a siege, and Letty knew exactly when to loosen the grip, so she could tighten it later. I got suspicious when a social worker from the benefits program called asking if expenses related to special care had increased. I said no. In fact, they'd gone down. Ellie was more stable, but the system showed otherwise. There were records of online purchases under my name, shipped to my address, made with a prepaid card tied to Ellie's social security number. Adaptive clothing, weighted pillows, inclusive concert tickets, all justifiable. Until you looked closer, the clothes never arrived. The tickets were for dates when Ellie was home with me, sick with a fever. And the weighted pillow, never seen it. So I started building a spreadsheet line by line. It's what my wife would have done. Letty had registered Ellie as a dependent in 2 state programs and 1 federal one, using my home address, but with her own alternate email, she received notifications, vouchers, even reimbursements for therapeutic expenses, all behind my back. And the cruelest part, she used Ellie's condition as justification for purchases that, in reality, benefited the other grandkids. Sensory board games, just overpriced memory, noise-canceling headphones, used on a Delta flight by kids with no auditory issues. The scam looked clean on paper, but it was soaked in a kind of abuse that doesn't leave bruises, only broken. Bonds. I recovered email confirmations from shopping websites. Many had my name, but were sent to the address ellie@outlook.com. I checked created 2 months before the trip. From Letty's home IP. She was meticulous and, like every amateur who thinks they're too clever, she left traces, too small for a criminal case at first, but big enough to destroy her public image. Letty was a volunteer at the local Baptist church. She led a group called Grannies in Action, which hosted inclusive meets for families with children. She was admired, applauded at services, but there she was, redirecting resources and affection only to the grandkids who fit in the photo, and using my daughter as a smokescreen. The hardest part was keeping a calm face, especially when she called me 2 weeks after the trip to say that the church group wanted to organize a surprise tribute for Ellie. She's a miracle, Adam, an angel. We should show the whole town what she means. I agreed, of course, but I asked her to send me all the documentation of the previous actions so I could help with the tribute material. Calm voice, no anger, and she sent it. Spreadsheets, photos, even receipts, all digitally time-stamped. I saved every file, renamed them, sent copies to an email account I had created just for this Ellie Ferretis. Mail.com. It was time to get help. But, not legal, not yet. I called Nate, a former client of mine, a retired accounting professor, now a quiet activist for administrative justice. He once sued a public school over lunch fraud and won. Show me everything. But don't touch the originals. They always doctor them when they feel the heat. In 2 short meetings, he explained exactly where Letty had crossed the line between bad intentions and technical illegality, especially her misuse of nonprofit tax IDs to get discounts and claim personal reimbursements. If it were just immoral, the system wouldn't act. But if it involved public funds and false statements in the name of a disabled minor, the story changed, and it would change. Not with a fight. The last puzzle piece came by chance, a WhatsApp recording. Letty had left the speakerphone on during a visit to one of her daughter's homes. While she thought Ellie was asleep on the couch, she said, "It's not my fault she was born like that, but I'm not going to spend the rest of my life pretending this is normal just to make him feel better." And then silence until Ellie got up from the couch, grabbed her tablet, and walked toward me. She showed me the screen. It was recording. Letty never noticed. That was the anatomy of the scheme. Exclusion disguised as care. Diversion masked by inclusion rhetoric. And at the center of it all, a child who never asked for more than to be treated like the others. That night, I left my laptop open. The spreadsheet finalized. Nate read it all, signed off with a single sentence. "You've got everything. Alt, that's missing is the right moment," and it would come. At an event Letty herself had volunteered to be honored at. Letty began to think she had me back in the palm of her hand. After the trip, she started coming over more often. She'd show up with sliced fruit, stories from church, plans for family bonding activities. Ellie no longer ran to greet her. She'd sit by the window in silence, holding the same stuffed animal, the one she clutches when she senses someone is lying. I smiled, nodded, poured coffee. Meanwhile, Nate and I were working. He came to my house twice a week, always in the late afternoon, brought a different folder each time. Didn't say much, he analyzed. Cross-referenced dates. Taught me how to document without drawing attention. We created a backup archive, stored on an external hard drive hidden behind the toaster oven, the one place Ellie never touched. "Let her think she's one," Nate would say. "The key is symmetry. She used your daughter. Your answer will use what she values most." Appearance. Letty was getting ready for an event called Families of Hope, hosted by a local nonprofit, an annual gathering for families with neurodivergent children. She kept saying the community needed more voices like hers. So I made the suggestion, "Letty, I think it would be beautiful if you participated with Ellie this year. Grace, the event coordinator, would love to hear from you." She didn't hesitate, booked a hair appointment, got her nails redone, asked for help writing a speech. The event was a month away. We had time. I started gathering everything she never expected someone would keep. Purchase records using Ellie's information, suspicious reimbursements, receipts issued by charities, all listing the same delivery address, ours. I also spoke with 2 social workers. I didn't file a complaint. I asked questions. Explained that I suspected transactions had been made in my daughter's name without my permission. They were cautious, but clear. They advised me to document everything. When I asked whether this could be considered misuse of public benefits, they didn't hesitate. If it can be proven, yes, and it's serious. I showed the documents to Nate. He reorganized everything, added accounting notes, flagged the most incriminating emails, the ones where Letty responded as if she were Ellie's legal guardian. During this process, I met Clara Jennings, a local journalist known for reporting on quiet violations in religious institutions and social programs. I laid out the case for her calmly. I didn't ask for scandal. I asked for accuracy. She listened to it all, read the material, stayed quiet for a few minutes, then said, "This story doesn't need outrage. It already has what matters. context, a pattern, and an invisible child at the center. Clara promised to publish the article after the event. In the meantime, Ellie and I made something of our own, an envelope. Inside, we placed the printed dossier, along with a note she wrote with my help. It read, "My name is Ellie. I like to play. I am my dad's daughter, and I don't like when people forget me." She drew a heart underneath, red just like the sticker we used to seal the envelope. The night before the event, Letty sent me a draft of her speech, full of metaphors about overcoming faith, resilience. "I want to end it with something strong, like she's a light in the darkness, you know?" I nodded, but I didn't correct a thing. On the morning of the event, Ellie chose the blue dress with giraffes, her favorite. Letty arrived before everyone else, smiling, greeting people like someone entering a room she already considered hers while she posed for pictures. I handed the envelope to Grace, the coordinator. No explanation. I just asked her to read it before the awards ceremony. She nodded, understood. Letty was called to the stage to applause. She wore the lilac blazer she always wore to church, masked her nerves with long sentences. The first line of her speech was read with rehearsed enthusiasm. "Raising a special child isn't a burden, it's a divine mission." But she didn't make it past the third sentence, Grace interrupted with a firm voice. "Before we continue, we'd like to share a letter from someone very special," and she read Ellie's note. The audience went silent, not in shock, in reverence. Then Grace presented the attached documents. She explained that they had been delivered by me, Ellie's father, and were already being reviewed by the appropriate authorities. Letty froze. She didn't cry, didn't argue, just stood there, holding the speech pages as if they were made of glass. The fall was clean. She walked off the stage without looking at anyone, and for the first time, Ellie didn't hide behind me. She stood tall, silent, watching. From the back of the room, Nate murmured, "This is what the system fears." Organized truth. The public hearing took place in an annex hall at City Hall. On a mild Wednesday, smelling of stale coffee and polished wood. Letty had no idea she'd be the centerpiece of the afternoon. The case wasn't criminal, not yet, but enough to trigger the County Department of Human Services, using the name of a minor with disabilities to obtain fraudulent reimbursements, qualified as administrative fraud. More importantly, systemic bad faith. The hearing was initiated by a city councilman after receiving the dossier from Clara Jennings, the journalist. She hadn't published everything. She saved the most sensitive parts to hand-deliver to the quietest council member, the one who never showed up in campaign ads but always sat on the ethics committees. Nate went with me. We sat in the back, near the exit. Ellie stayed with Grace, the coordinator of the Families of Hope event, in an adjacent room with sensory toys and dim lighting. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew we were together. That was enough. Letty arrived holding a small folder and wearing a blue scarf around her neck. She looked paler, but still held her chin high like someone who feared no one. Maybe she thought it would just be a light questioning. Maybe she thought her past still served as a resume. The councilman began reading. He listed the reimbursement requests made under Ellie's name, detailed the dates, amounts, descriptions, mentioned the emails, the IPs, the receipts cross-checked with statements from other grandmothers under investigation. Some had already agreed to restitution. One had returned $6,000 before even being summoned. Letty tried to interrupt, once, claiming everything was done out of love, but the councilman didn't look at her. He just kept reading. When he mentioned the misuse of state-issued coupons reserved for families with neurodivergent children, one of the social workers present furrowed her brow. She had assisted Letty months before, and according to records, the information Letty had given was incomplete. At the end of the statement, Clara stood up, holding a white envelope. She asked to speak. Permission was granted. "What's at stake here isn't just public money," she said firmly. "It's the image of children who can't defend themselves when they're used as excuses." And Ellie, she was cut out of a photo, but not out of the truth. She handed the envelope to the councilman. Inside were the audio recordings, including the one where Letty said, "I'm not going to pretend this is normal just to make him feel good." The councilman paused, then closed the folder, said the committee would take the appropriate administrative measures and that the case would be forwarded to the county prosecutor. No one applauded. It wasn't a victory. It was just the truth doing what it does when given space, spreading. Letty left before the session ended, without looking around, without asking for explanations, and for the first time without a speech. Outside, the local press was already waiting. A community radio team was trying to understand why a grandmother, known for social work, was being named in a fraud investigation. Clara didn't give an interview. Neither did Nate, but one of the mothers who had witnessed everything approached the microphones. It was Margaret, the woman who had called me weeks before. She spoke calmly. "My son was also used by someone we trusted. Today, seeing this handled seriously gives me hope. Not because of the punishment, because of the clarity." She didn't speak for anyone, but she spoke for all of us. That night, Ellie fell asleep early. Grace had given her a new puzzle. Before bed, she hugged me tightly. "Daddy, was today a good day?" "Yes, sweetheart, even without Grandma." Especially because of that, Letty's downfall didn't come with handcuffs. It came with what she feared most, the looks of those who used to applaud her, the silence that filled the church the following Sunday, the questions no one asked out loud but everyone carried in their eyes. The local pastor withdrew his support from the Grandmas in Action group. The nonprofit where she volunteered suspended her participation indefinitely, and a letter, signed by 4 families, was sent to city officials, requesting a full review of all registrations made using family authorizations, especially in cases involving children with disabilities. There was no scandal. There were consequences, and I watched it all from a distance, with Ellie on my lap, with Nate by my side. Justice, this time, didn't need a courtroom. It only needed patience. We moved 3 months later, nothing drastic, just enough. A smaller house, in the same county, but farther from the main road. A wide yard, no fence, the nearest neighbor nearly 50 meters away. A different kind of silence than we had before, not empty, but full. Ellie called it the Whisper House, because everything there felt like it wanted to be said gently. The old solar panel I had installed myself on our previous house was replaced by 2 new ones, with clean wiring. It took me a whole week to set them up with Nate. He'd come by sometimes, bring tools, stay until the afternoon. He never talked about Letty or the hearing. He'd just put coffee on the stove and say, "Good wind today. Should be enough power for 2 days." Ellie was now being homeschooled with a personalized program funded by reimbursements. I recovered from one of the defrauded programs. It wasn't much, but it was enough to guarantee an occupational therapist, an inclusive educator, and most importantly, a routine without disruptions. She laughed more, slept better, and invited me to dance to wordless songs in the middle of the living room. Once a week, Clara would send me quiet updates. She no longer posted anything about Letty, but she mentioned progress and access control. For support programs, Ellie's name was brought up as a symbol at a municipal meeting without fanfare. Just a reminder, the child who didn't make it into the photo, but showed up in the system. Grace visited us with a bouquet of sunflowers. Ellie greeted her with a drawing in hand, 2 people holding hands, and a son with big eyes. "That's you and me, Auntie Grace," she said. "And that's the son that watches and sees everything." She didn't know it, but she had just described her own story. A son that saw what no one wanted to look at, and shone slowly, until the weather changed. Letty never tried to reach out again. I found out she moved north, where her sister lives. I also heard she lost access to several local benefits and that her presence in religious communities is now met with more caution, not because anyone wanted to punish her, but because some mistakes don't get erased by prayer. I hold no grudge, just memory. Life returned to its own rhythm. I received new job offers, but chose to reduce my workload. I only take 2 clients per week, small homes, simple folks. One of them offered me an Australian Shepherd puppy in exchange for wiring his barn. Ellie named him Marble. He sleeps on the porch. Nate said he's going to write a report on the case, with no names. A study on the anatomy of broken trust and systems that fail not out of malice, but because of too much faith and blood ties. I told him I'd help on one condition, not a single word about me. He understood. You don't want them to remember you. I want them to remember Ellie and you. As what? Just the guy who was there? That's all. Sometimes we walk to the lake at the end of the trail. Ellie brings Marble. I bring a folding stool. She tosses pebbles into the water, watches the reflections. One time she asked if the lake keeps the pictures. I told her yes. That water has memory. She smiled and said, "Then water is like me." That afternoon, when we got back home, she left a note on the fridge, written with crooked but firm letters. "This house has a girl who knows when she's forgotten. But now she's remembered every day." Nobody applauded, but she was. Never left out of a photo again.